You might be familiar with a situation like the following. Sales says marketing isn't sending the right leads. Marketing says sales isn't following up. Somehow, both teams are hitting their own metrics and pipeline isn't really going anywhere. It's often one of the most common breakdowns that I see when working with fintech companies, and I'm sure that many of us have seen from the marketing or sales perspective. And that's why in today's episode, I'm sitting down with Cristina Ciaravalli, CEO and founder of Valley Ventures. This is her own consultancy where she helps Series A and B fintech companies build revenue teams that actually close. Before starting her own consultancy, Cristina led enterprise sales and partnerships at Unit, where she closed some of the company's largest deals. And before that, she was a top-performing account executive at Plaid. And even before that, she worked in sales and trading at Goldman Sachs and BlackRock. So she's got a good perspective of both financial institutions and fintechs. And I asked Cristina to come on because I thought it'd be great for us marketers to hear the perspective of sales and try and understand a bit better, why does the relationship between the two often break down and what needs to be in place so there's a more seamless and healthy relationship. So we talk about why fintech sales is maybe a bit different and what it requires in reps, the biggest mistakes founders make when building early stage sales teams, and how sales and marketing should work together to drive revenue. And then finally, all about warm, outbound, ABM, and why this is more relevant in today's market. If you're in marketing, this episode will hopefully help you understand better the perspective of the sales team and how they think about growth and what they're looking for from the marketing team. And if you're a revenue leader, founder, this is a great episode to learn about building a sales team, generating pipeline, closing deals, all that good stuff. Here's Cristina. All right, so I'd love to start off with Founder League. I thought it was a really cool kind of concept and an interesting intersection. Can you tell us a bit more about what it is and why you like it, or what does it entail?
Yeah, thanks so much. Founder League is a way for founders to connect that's not in the evenings, not always alcohol oriented. So what we are is basically a community of founders, from ones who still have their day jobs and just have ideas on a napkin and maybe haven't even raised $1 or left their actual corporate job yet, to exited founders who are working on their next thing. So what I like about it is it's a really nice range of folks who are really, really early and more experienced. And we do 10 founders per workout. We work out in New York about every other week. There's every type of fitness activity you can think of, from Pilates to berries. And then the founders really range from folks who have started yogurt companies and tampon companies and CPG products to B2B fintech infra and AI, which is fun because there's always, people might think, oh, they have nothing in common. No, there's always the coffee, which is after the workout, where the 10 of us go around and say who we are, what we do, and then make one ask to the group. And that's where I think the real magic happens, is when people go, oh, I know someone you need to talk to. And it might be a wholesale distributor. It might be a venture capitalist. But either way, everybody's sharing resources and ideas. And that is my favorite part about Founder League.
Yeah, I love it because, as you say, it's not the same type of event as, many are. It's a bit different, but while still being healthy and kind of all these things. So, and maybe some people can do mornings, it's easier, that kind of thing. So I like it. If I'm ever in New York, I'll try and join. And and it's been like your first year with your own business. How have you found it going from in-house sales, GTM, to doing your own thing? Like, how has that been?
Yeah, it's been really fun. I definitely feel like I'm doing more sales than ever, because now not only am I helping my companies with their sales efforts, and I really like to do top-down strategy where I work with CEOs and say, okay, how many AEs do we need to hire? What should we pay them? What should the quotas be for the year? And how should we think about our sales playbook? To really bottoms up, where I'm working with everyone from the SDRs to the AEs and trying to figure out, okay, what should we be doing in order to move your deals forward? Why is this deal getting stuck? How can we help you, close deals faster and close bigger deals? So I'm loving that I get to still be in the arena on the sales sense. The other tricky thing is now I'm doing all the BD for my business, which is where I feel like I still have a quota and I'm still trying to hit these goals and targets for my own business and for myself. And really, we have three main pillars of the business. We have recruiting, where I help sales teams find their next account executives and their founding go-to-market folks. We have advisory, where, as I mentioned, I do the top-down, working with founders on what should quotas be and how many people should we hire and what should the territory plans be and what's our real sales playbook to bottoms up, where I'm working with the actual reps and I'm looking into their pipeline and I'm helping them with deals and progressing them forward and making sure we're closing bigger deals and closing the deals faster. So advisory is really that second bucket. And then the third for me is really events. And I believe that community is one of the biggest go-to-market advantages. And so I'm constantly throwing events, following up from events I've thrown, making sure I've got the next event sponsored. We'll be throwing an event in New York for New York Fintech Week that I'm super excited about. And that's a lot of work. So trying to make sure that all of the recruiting processes, the advisory, which is really the founding principle, the bulk of our business, and then also the events, which I really think are a great way to earn top of funnel, but also just to help support the founder community, which is really important to me. So it's like I have 3 jobs now instead of just one.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into each one of those different disciplines. And yes, agree on the events. I mean, I've been to a couple of your events and they've been fantastic. So yeah, there's a lot of things there to dig into and how to do a good event. But the theme for today that I kind of wanted to talk about is like that sales and marketing working together. And you have a perspective from the sales perspective, which I think is always really interesting and important to understand how those two teams can work well together. So I think if we're talking about building a revenue team, starting from, maybe not from scratch, but if we've got an early stage fintech company, they're building a revenue team, what would you say are kind of the mistakes that companies often make when it comes to building those teams? And what would you say is maybe unique, if there is anything, about fintech specifically?
Oh, man. Let's talk about what's unique, and then we can maybe talk about the mistakes, because I think it links back to what's unique. So for fintech sales, I think it's inherently more complex because 1, you have the regulatory environment, which always adds friction. 2, a lot of deals, like for me, when I was at my last company, they were tri-party deals. So I had to sign my client, but then I also had to find a bank sponsor. And so you think you're doing great in this one sales cycle, this one process with this one stakeholder, this one company, this one person, and you might be. And then you turn around and you look at the other party that also has to sign off, and you're like, wait a minute. Is everybody aligned? And really getting 3 companies on the same page, it's much harder than getting 2. So I think that is one hugely unique piece of fintech go-to-market. And then the third, I would just say, is really sales education. A lot of my clients are hiring account executives for various roles. And my fintech clients all need to find someone who has a bit of a finance background or understands compliance, or can at least make sure that if they're on a phone call and they're showing a flow of funds, that it's legal, right? Because there are real implications to someone selling a product that, or a workflow or a payments flow that can't actually legally take place without certain licenses or without certain products or pre-existing measures in place. So I think those things make it very unique. You know, the sales teams aren't just selling. They're really like that bridge between compliance, product, and sales. So they almost need to be good at 3 jobs.
Yeah, it's very consultative.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the best sales reps are the ones that actually think like compliance people. And I've always had to work very closely with compliance teams to make sure that I'm keeping up, because regulation changes so quickly these days. But that, I think, is the type of seller that will help startups really avoid making costly mistakes early on. So I think it's important to have at least the first one, if not all of them, have some sort of regulatory compliance understanding. It'll just accelerate things. And when you're at that early stage, time is money. So with all of that being said, your next question was what are the mistakes, right?
Yeah.
I think, look, I don't want to talk that. I mean, we all make mistakes. Early stage companies, my own included, probably yours as well. You know, we're learning every day. But I think some of the easy missteps to avoid are, 1, hiring in 2s. I think when you bring in 1 rep, they have no idea where the bar is, right? They have no idea what's possible. They have no idea how hard to push themselves versus what's acceptable. And when you bring in 2, I think that creates, and I never like real competition in sales that causes sharp elbows or mistrust. I do believe that founding AE should feel like they're on the same team. And if you win, I win, and we're in the trenches together. However, with 2, you will encourage that momentum and you will get them to actually, I think, pick up the pace and kind of look around and say, all right, I don't want to be so far behind this other person, or we together can set the pace. Versus when it's just 1, it's also really hard for my founders to measure. Is your best? Is this good enough? Or is this just what they're doing because they're the only one? So hiring in 2s would probably be one of the mistakes. And it can be challenging. And I wouldn't say like, don't hire someone just because you don't have that second person, but at least try to bring that second person in as closely as possible versus spreading it out too far. The second thing I'll say, especially on my founder-led sales teams is we've seen a lot of founders think that they're doing discovery when in reality, they're kind of just asking that like first, maybe second layer question and not really asking, what I would call, I have this training I do on the 5 whys, not going third, fourth, fifth layer deeper. And then they're confused when they jump into the pitch on the first call or they start the demo on the first call and they're like, it was so weird. I thought the call went well. And then after that first call, we didn't get a follow-up. And I'm like, did you understand the pain? Like, how much did you really ask them? They're kind of like, well, no, I just got so excited and I showed them. And I'm like, okay, we need to, there's an Italian saying, which is piano, piano, which means slowly, slowly. And it's like, we need to make sure that, well, yes, we're keeping up with momentum on our side. We're doing our proper diligence. We're asking the right questions. And deep discovery is critical for any good sales process so that you can really understand the pain and then tie your solutions back to the pain. I always say, we're not selling software, we're selling solutions to someone's pain. And then the third thing I think I would say, I see a lot of early founders struggling with actually who their ICP is. And I see them try to go very broad and say, we're building this thing and we can sell it to everybody and everyone should want to buy it. And here's all the people in the world and all the types of companies and all the use cases. And that's actually harder in the beginning. I think going narrow and not making the mistake of we are something for everyone will allow sales teams to really hone in and come up with the example customers that they can hopefully use as design partners, use those as references, explain like we are tailor-made for you, and go really deep and maybe prove out that one area first before expanding to all these other types of use cases and companies and ICPs. And I think that to me is just something that it sounds in practice very simple, but it's something that I think just a lot of early founders can get too excited about and forget.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with all of those. And interesting, I like what you said about hiring in twos. So is that, just so I understand, that's to encourage a bit of friendly competition and so that, both the founder and the team also know kind of where we're at, have a bar. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think also, look, onboarding is lonely. When you're new to a company and there is no onboarding playbook and you're looking around like, I don't want to bother this new CEO that brought me in. The CTO is probably over there coding and trying to figure out all the product stuff. And you're sort of like, help, who do I talk to? Who do I bounce ideas off of? Where do I go? And I also think that when there's two folks together, they can use each other as resources to bounce ideas off of. And I also like hiring people with complementary skill sets. So perhaps, I have a prop tech client. We hired 2 reps and one was an absolute expert in the prop tech arena, had all these warm introductions, this crazy network, but was less experienced as a seller. And then the other one was newer to prop tech, but a very technical enterprise seller. And it's like when you mix those two together, I really think that balances out and that helps the two actually help sort of make up for the gap in the other one and makes it much less competitive than if 2 people were coming in with the exact same challenges or skill sets. Because in the end, I do think the better sales teams are ones where the sales teams work together, share resources, help each other, don't fight over who's tagged an account in Salesforce as their own because yesterday it was tagged as you, like no one has time for that kind of drama. So you do want the salespeople to work together, but I also think you want them to motivate each other too.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about sales and marketing working together. If we're talking to if an early stage fintech is listening, potentially a founder, how do you think that kind of early go-to-market motion should work, sales and marketing? Because you've just mentioned, right, start with 2 people ideally, maybe complementary skills. Like, where does marketing come in then? And how do you think they should work with marketing?
Yeah, I really think salespeople have to earn the right to get marketers, to be honest with you. Salespeople, I think, usually come in first. And if the company's been doing founder-led sales, they're going to basically say, okay, founding AE or founding go-to-market person, sales lead, help. I'm drowning. These are all the deals I have going on. Can you take them off my plate? Because maybe now we're fundraising for our Series A or whatever it is. And the salesperson is going to come in and basically their number one goal is bring in revenue, right? Full stop, close those deals. Then that salesperson needs to start thinking more strategically and more long-term, right? Once you have those initial design partners in, it's okay. Are we building pipeline? Probably not. They're probably not outbounding because they're trying to close all of these deals. So I think going back to your mistake question, I think another one is not using like your warm network and really making sure that everybody that you know on LinkedIn in real life or that your first connections have as their first connections are being tapped in the process of trying to figure out who should buy your product. So that's another one that this early salesperson should do pre-marketing. And then I think the best marketing partner to a salesperson is the one that can say, okay, we're running these targeted ad campaigns. Okay, I'm going to make sure our SEO is golden. And maybe that's writing a bunch of blog posts to put on the website so that people can at least find you and find what you've built. Events, I've talked about this already, but I think go to market, a huge component of strategy should be community and should be bringing like-minded people in a room where you're not really trying to sell to them at the dinner, you're trying to build those relationships. And long term, you'd be shocked what really comes from that. And then also content, like who's writing your case studies? Who's writing your one-pagers? Who's writing your pitch deck? And is it pretty? Like who's designing that and making it beautiful? It's probably not the account executive. And I highly doubt it's going to be, the two founders unless one has a design background. So I think assets really help those reps close deals. And I'm lucky enough to even work with folks like verbatim where they are a case study as a service company. And so, if you don't have the funds to yet hire a marketing person, there are great ways to plug in fractional resources to kind of get those certain assets built and things done to support your seller until your revenue is at the point where you can then afford a true marketing lead or a true CMO or a marketing team.
Mm-hmm. Is there like sort of a preference? Maybe it depends too much on the company, on the kind of marketer. Like, would you say it has to be content first, or it has to be performance first, or maybe it depends a lot? I mean, it depends a lot on the company, I guess. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it depends a lot on the company. I also think it depends on what are the gaps of the salespeople. Salespeople are actually have this weird, amazing design background. Great. The decks probably look pretty good, but maybe they're clueless on SEO or vice versa. So I'm really about zooming out and looking at my early founding teams on the go-to-market and business side and saying, what skills do we need? What skills do we have? Okay, then we're going to hire to fill those gaps.
I was going to ask a bit about ABM. This is more B2B, I would say. But how have you seen it work well? Because ABM is a perfect example of like sales and marketing have to be so like working so closely together. What have you found works well? Because I've always asked this question to marketers, but haven't asked it to salespeople. So how do you think a good ABM campaign works with both sales and marketing working together?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we did a lot of this when I was leading enterprise at my last company. And I think it's critical that you know who those top 10 accounts are and you really focus specifically on selling to not only those businesses. And I'm a B2B girl, so all my clients are B2B, all I've B2B. But not only on like who those companies are, but who the specific person is and really how do they want to be sold to? Do they need documents to forward around internally? Then I'm going to be like, marketing, help. Like they've asked for this one pager or they've asked for this Loom video, or they've asked for something specific. And when I was closing one of my largest deals, it was a restaurant company. And I said, okay, marketing, I want all of us on this like big executive to executive call. I think we had like 12 execs from our team and like 15 from there. So it's almost 30 people on one Zoom. I was like, we need to bring the energy. We need to make this fun. Otherwise, all these 30 people are going to fall asleep. And so marketing made us literal custom Zoom backgrounds with their logo, our logo, their color. And like, that's an example of us trying to think really outside of the box on what would this account really want to see? What would like make people smile on this call? Because at the end of the day, we're humans selling to humans. We made custom landing pages where they could type in ourcompaniesname.com/their company's name. And we had every resource we'd ever talked about. And we had everything. I mean, it was password protected. It was like definitely just for them, but we had everything that their team might want to see in one centralized place that didn't involve crazy Google Drive, that didn't involve like links and all this stuff and emails and PDFs floating around with no home. So we really tried to create this central place for our biggest accounts to go that sharing a link, you could text it to somebody, right? Like trying to make it really easy for them. And then I think what I also just loved is that marketing was really willing to do anything and everything to win those top 10 accounts. I mean, we talked about putting billboards outside of their offices in San Francisco. We talked about all of the details. I mean, even that one restaurant company, I remember we made the agenda of one of the final calls, like aperitivo, appetizer, main course, dolce, like really just to try to keep it interesting throughout and show them like, we get your business, like, and we get the type of brand you are, and we can match that. And so I think account-based marketing has to be like a true handhold partnership between sales and marketing. And you can't just have marketing do it and give it to sales. It should really be like a back and forth dialogue because the salesperson is one of those calls with those people. They're going to know best what will resonate. And then marketing is going to be like the executors. And they're going to be the ones that say, that was a great idea. Let's blow it up bigger. Or I don't know if that's possible, but what about this? And so you kind of need sales and marketing to really work in lockstep to make ABM really effective.
Yeah, that's why, like, whenever we have clients that say, oh, should we do ABM and this and that? And I'm like, you need to have the right structure in place. You need to be able to do it. Because I think so many people have tried ABM and are like, it doesn't work. And I'm like, you need to really know what you're doing. Because I think if not, it's so easy to waste money. Like, a lot of people say ABM and it's really just LinkedIn campaigns. That's what I've seen. And it's so much more than that.
Yeah, it is so much more than that. And also, I'll be honest, like, I don't know that ABM is necessary super early stage. I really think you could be putting too many eggs in one basket, spending all this money, and they might not even want to talk to you. So I think there's a balance of like doing account-based marketing to get in front of folks. And then once you've gotten in front of them and you're like, okay, they've been bait, there's something here, go even deeper and spend more money on the people that are actually listening. Otherwise, it can feel like you're screaming into a void.
Yeah, that's true. Early stage, like, yeah, you've got, if you think of kind of the funnel or your target market, like your TAM, right? The people that you're first going to work with, there's easier ways to reach them. And then I think ABM is like later stage companies, right? That's when they're going after the big companies. That's when it makes sense. Yeah. I was going to ask, you've kind of already answered a little bit the question, like what does good marketing look like from a salesperson perspective? How, like, is it, I know it's not just this, but is it like they bring in all the leads and we just have to close them? Is it whatever, we need a deck or whatever, they're there? Like, how would you describe specifically good marketing?
Oh man, how much time do we have? Look, I think I mentioned lockstep, and I really mean it. Like, for all the biggest deals of my career, it was not done on my own. It took a village, and marketing is a big part of that village. I think, yes, targeted campaigns, whether that's LinkedIn ad campaigns or event and conference strategy campaigns, like, they usually are spearheading those fully. And I mean, we had a woman at my last company who did the most insane installations at Money 2020 and Fintech meetup. And even just that, getting people to come by the booth because of her work was speeding the salespeople. So I think that's like one great example. Thoughtful events are obviously huge. I think also strong product storytelling. We had a fantastic head of content, and he would write these unreal case studies.
We had him on the podcast. Yeah, I know John.
Amazing. He's the best.
Yeah, He's very good.
As a natural storyteller who can really help articulate the value prop of the business, I can do less selling because I'm just going to give them his video or his piece of content or his case study or whatever it may be, the webinars that we did together, and people can see for themselves. So I really like when marketing has content that speaks for itself, events that just drive hype and buzz and the right people to come to them. It's very easy to throw like a brand awareness event, but are you really attracting the ICP? That's a nice nuance there. And then I think in the end, like, the best marketing teams are the ones that work with sales as one unit. It's not marketing over here and sales over here and we're in our silos, but really, like, they every single week are on the same page reviewing pipeline together and strategizing, like, what do we need to do to get the biggest and best deals closed together? And then marketing can go create, build, set up, find ways to support sales in doing that.
And why do you think, like, in your experience, having now worked with quite a few companies, why do you think that relationship often breaks down? Because, like, I see this as well, where there's often not maybe the best relationship. Maybe sales is complaining, the leads are not good quality, marketing doesn't like that they have to report into sales. Yeah, I have definitely seen companies where that relationship isn't the best. Why do you think that happens? And what do you think they can do to try and repair that?
I mean, this is going to sound simple, but I think the real breakdown is communication. So much gets lost in translation. And I feel like, look, salespeople are on calls all day, right? If they're good, they should be on the phone all day. And marketing folks don't always hear those, right? Unless they're listening to recordings, like, they're not the ones on the front lines. And so I think sometimes marketing could create assets and say, like, this is how we should say it, and this is what works. And the salesperson is like, that's very out of touch. That's actually not how we've ever explained it. That's not how we want to talk about it. And I've actually seen it a lot where either the marketing language can be so oversimplified that the salesperson, like, wait a minute, hold on, that's actually not accurate, or that's like too, dumbing it down. And on the flip side, I've seen marketing that could be like really complicated and like very complex. And a salesperson might be fearful that you're actually going to scare away the buyer. So I think where things usually break down is not having the two teams, sales and marketing, as I alluded to earlier, really like have live conversations, maybe rewatch parts of calls where light bulbs are going off. And it's like, that's the wording or that's the messaging. But at my first startup, we always had like marketing write us copy that we would use in emails to invite people to things or to outbound. And sales would always open them and be like, well, this sounds like a beautiful advertisement or a beautiful thing on a website, but it doesn't sound like how we as salespeople email and speak to people. And so it's bridging that gap of like, you don't want salespeople to speak so casually. They do need to be polished up a bit. But sometimes I fear marketing language can sound overly formal. And so it's really that conversation and feedback loop to meet in the middle and have something that resonates and make sure marketing adapts quickly. And it's really on sales to give marketing that info, right? Like they're not going to know what's happening on those calls unless sales tells them.
Yes. And I would say the other thing is also obviously culture. It also has to come top down, right? Like if the leaders, I have seen this unfortunately, where they don't believe in marketing or they think it's not that important. And if your leader doesn't believe marketing is that important, it's going to be hard to create a kind of culture where those two teams are working together. And it could be also the opposite. Maybe the leader, I don't know, I haven't seen that yet, but like they don't like sales, which that would be bad if that happened. But yeah, and then I've also seen marketing teams that exactly as you say, don't join the calls, or they're like, I've literally heard someone say this, like, oh, I don't have time to learn about the product. I'm like, come on, like this is you need to learn about the product. How can you write messaging for a product that you don't understand? So this is what I've seen as well, like this kind of, but I often think it has to come also from top down. If the leadership isn't going to try and foster that kind of culture, I don't know. The sales marketing teams can try as hard as it can, but it can be tough, I feel like, right?
I am here to say marketing is very important. So
yeah. No, I know.
But no, you're right. And I mean, I've even worked at different startups and with different startups where I would call some an engineering house. It's all about the engineers. It's all about the product and it's all about shipping product. And I've worked at other places where it's like sales is king of the castle and it's all about sales. And if sales wants something, sales gets it. And so it's really interesting that the biases of where founders have come from and what they've done previously or what they've seen work or not work very much informs how they feel about certain parts of the org. And I think there's all those executive functions for a reason. And maybe depending on the stage of your company and the type of product you're building, of course, timing depends. But I really think that in order to have an effective sales team, you need marketing. And in order to have marketing do their best work, you need sales to help inform them on how to do that best work.
Yep. No, couldn't agree more. Are there any like routines or I don't know, templates or formats that you found that has worked quite well between marketing and sales? So for example, I know when I interviewed John at Unit, he said that you at Unit had like a story time gong, like I think it was every 2 weeks or something, where Gong, which is a sales recording kind of platform, they would join these calls or they would watch the calls that sales had. So are there any that you have seen that are like that really great that you've seen help bridge that gap between the two teams?
Yeah, I mean, John and I have worked together at 2 startups now, so our feedback loop and our relationship is very strong. So I'm not expecting all sales and marketing folks to be exactly that. But yes, 100%. I think having a sales marketing weekly where it's not just an update meeting. I don't hate updates. I'm like, that could be an email. But where it's actually more of a brainstorm and more of a forum where salespeople can say, hey, John, I'm really trying to move this deal forward. Here's where I'm struggling. This is what I think marketing could help me with. What do you guys think? And then John can say, okay, here's a piece of content I can get for you by Friday, end of day. Here's something I think we could do. Like, it was marketing's idea to stand up those websites, like those specific landing pages. And it was a great idea because I was explaining like the number of pieces of content that we were sending was becoming so high that it was almost unmanageable for me as the rep to say, oh, it's in this doc. Oh, it's in that doc. Oh, we sent it on this day at this time. It was like, we need a centralized hub. And that's when marketing can really raise their hand and say, we got you, and that's how it should be. So I think those meetings, I also think like letting them into your Gong, giving them all Gong licenses. I know some teams only have it for sales. I think marketing should absolutely have access, and a part of onboarding new marketers should be to listen to those and to really deeply understand the product, as you said. And then I also really just think when it comes to events and what marketing is doing, I think the best teams running events that are not just like marketing throws them and sales shows up, but is to have like an actual salesperson be the assigned like DRI, directly responsible individual on said event. So for example, me, it could be Money 2020. And like, I'm going to be the one that's maybe in a ton of meetings with marketing on Money 2020. I'll shield the sales team from spending all the time talking about Money 2020. But when it's important and it's stuff that the sales team needs to know or needs to action for marketing, Cristina is the one that has to go back to the AEs and then report back to marketing. And so I think by designating point people for each of those big events, you create more accountability. Salespeople are always more likely to listen to their fellow salesperson, but then marketing also knows like, okay, the buck ends with her or with him, and they're the person that is ultimately going to be our number one partner from the sales team. And that usually makes things seamlessly without taking up too much time.
I love that. Yeah. Have someone from sales, because exactly what you say, they're talking to customers every day. They know like the event that you're going to run. Will a dinner really hit, or maybe a fireside chat? Like they will know a lot better. So yeah, no, that's a really good tip. I want to talk about dinners and events in a second, but we of course have to touch on AI, because I think interestingly, AI, I mean, everyone's talking about AI in marketing, but there's also been a lot of AI in sales doing many things, which I think we would all agree is not, I don't want to say it's not appropriate, but definitely just hindering sales, like AI SDRs and all these things. I mean, I think we all receive like probably like so many a day. It's exhausting. You've said like on other podcasts and in your content that your favorite is kind of like warm outbound. Could you talk a bit more about what you mean by that? And also how can you use AI in a way that still builds trust and isn't like these spammy outbound links and stuff?
Oh man, the AI SDRs. I mean, the same way that I think everyone, Armand, is talking about AI slop on LinkedIn, it really just does feel like someone is throwing like 3 bullet points into ChatGPT or into Claude and then putting them into emails. And they're like, I did amazing outbound. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like respectfully, these LLMs are not trained to speak like salespeople or to bug at the human emotion, which really at the end of the day is sales. Because guess what? They're not humans. So they're very bad at that. And I think that all of these different tools out there that everyone's saying allows them to do such great volume, like, sure, AI SDRs, they are optimizing for volume, but what they're not doing is optimizing for trust. And that is, I think, the biggest disconnect. And if you lose trust, it is very, very hard to get it back.
Yeah, especially in fintech.
Yes, 100%. And regulated money is moving. Like it is much more complicated than just selling licenses to Zoom software or Slack channel. You know, it's very serious and there's real liability with using these products. And so I know, for example, on the sales side, at my last company, we always said like, you are one person away from getting a meeting with whoever you want to meet. You are like, whether it's you yourself or someone on this team, they know someone who can get you in front of them. And I really believe that if founders aren't using like their warm introductions and their network, and whether that's their introductions through VCs or people they went to college with or used to work with at their last company, or again, these community events, then you're missing out. Like it's dramatically more effective. I think the first 100 meetings should be through warm outbound. I don't even think you need to pick up the phone and do cold calling until you've exhausted at least 100 accounts that you want to meet with and try to get 100 warm intros. I fully stand by that. And I think that we've seen the results are something like 15 times higher conversion on a warm outbound versus a cold outbound. So it's like, if we know it's more effective and we all have these networks through something or another, why aren't we using them? Why are we resorting to these tools that are actually just getting us blocked in the spam filters?
Yep, exactly. Are there ways that you have found that AI is good? Like, for example, it is very good with Clay, right? You know, the data platform. Like, it's very good for research. It's very good for gathering information. Are there any ways like that you've been using it that you have found very helpful?
I mean, yes, like I use Superhuman because it helps me get through my emails and organize my emails. And I always say that I think AI should make sales reps more efficient and more effective. I don't think that AI is going to replace sales reps. You heard it here first. I know a lot of people are like, AI is coming for your jobs. I continue to believe salespeople will still need jobs because people buy from people. But in terms of things like building great decks, let AI do it. Summarizing calls. I mean, we all have Gong and Granola and Grain. Like, let the AI do it. Organizing your next steps. Like, those are great tools for that too. And even training reps and going through practice scenarios. Like, I don't think it's bad for an actual account executive before they bother their manager to try to chat through something with Claude and figure out like, what should my next step be? And then, oh, maybe the light bulb goes off and now they're more self-sufficient. You're protecting everybody's time. So I think that's where AI can come in handy and actually create like a more efficient and more effective sales process for reps. But I think where it breaks is when it's used to replace human judgment on writing copy that actually sounds like a human. I don't think it's there yet. And maybe it will be, and then I'll have a different take. But this is March 2026, so let's just timestamp this. And I think that it's so easy to have your AI outbound look very generic and be very boring and look fake. And then that is easy to ignore. But when you actually are yourself and bring human character and warmth to an email, I think that's when people say, oh, wow, this person did their homework on me and this doesn't sound like a robot. There's a real woman on the other end of this. No, I'm going to respond.
Yes. And until agents can buy, and I mean like B2B enterprise, like pick a payment provider, we're always going to be selling to humans, right? It's always going to be a person who's buying it. So that's relationships are always going to be important until that happens, which I don't see that happening because why would you delegate that? But anyway, so yeah, it's all about relationships and building trust, hence why events are so good for that. And I think I've had a few people on our podcast talk about events, and it's just like everyone's more and more like they're just becoming more important because of AI and everything. So you have a lot of experience doing events. Would you consider in a way events are kind of warm outbound because you can, even if you're not in touch with that person, you're asking them to speak at your event or even just come to your event. It's not a ask to sell, it's an ask to an event. Do you feel like, does that tie in a little bit into your strategy?
100% for both me and Value Ventures and my clients. I think, look, if you don't know someone, the chances that they're going to hear you out about your product and try to understand what it is you're building are pretty low. But if you invite them to an event, which everyone loves a free meal, and then, you give them a good reason to come to said free meal, because now I think there's so many dinners that it has to be more than just, look at this new hot restaurant in New York. It's like, okay, well, next week there'll be another fintech doing an event at that restaurant. So it's really like, here's the thesis, here's the theme, here are the other guests that are coming. And everyone should really have a motivating force aside from just meeting the host, but of who else is in the room or what else they could learn or have to gain. Maybe it's an intro they've always wanted. And, because people in fintech sell to other people in fintech, right? So it doesn't have to just be one to many, but it can be many to many across the dinner. And I believe like the small curated events are a lot more common now. I think when I started back to New York in 2021, we were all vaccinated. We just wanted to get out and be with people. And so happy hours and drinks with anyone in the fintech ecosystem felt like good enough because we were just thrilled to be in the world again. But now there's so many events and it's hard in a night. I'll get invited to 3 events in a night sometimes. And I'm like, how can I choose where to go? And part of that is based on venue, location, making sure it's accessible, easy to get to, and a great spot. The other part of that is really, what am I going to get out of this event? What is the ROI on my time? Because everyone is short on time. And so really thinking deeply about, okay, what can they leave with? And then articulating that, like going one step further to say like, after the dinner, you're going to expect to meet these kinds of people, eat this kind of food, learn these kinds of go-to-market tricks, and, expand your network. And for a lot of people, like that is compelling. And so they'll want to go. The dinner that I just hosted 2 weeks ago, I applied the same founder league model where we went around and said one task with the group and we didn't stop talking. I mean, we got kicked out of the private room. Like every single person, there were about 12 of us there and every single person said one thing that was on their mind. A lot of it was about AI and fintech. A lot of it was about go-to-market and selling in the compliance and regulated environments. And oh my goodness, like the level of honesty, the level of vulnerability, it was all-time high. And I felt like people reached out to me after to thank me for having those specific people sit next to them. And, doing the seating chart, I always think is something you should be intentional with, is pairing the right people for the certain ends of the tables. But I think vulnerability and intimacy and intentionality in those dinners, like even if it's just 12 people, beats a 120 person event every single time because it's really curated, it's really specific, and people can be sure that they'll walk away with something tangible.
And so I know you also do like side events. Do you have a preference for doing, like when I say side events, I mean more like your typical networking for drinks, canapes, and everyone's just chit-chatting and maybe there's 50 people versus a 12-person dinner? Do you prefer the dinners now? Do you feel like those are better?
It's tricky. Like for FinTech Week, no one's going to want to sit at a dinner, right? Because there's going to be 5 events per evening. And so it's going to be harder to wrangle those seats and get them confirmed. So that is, for me, more of a week where it's like, we know it'll be highly competitive. So let's have something where 50 people can come and go. Maybe they need to get to their next event or they're coming late from a different event or they want to get home on the train or to wherever they live in the city. That's fine. And I still think there's value in 50 people, happy hours and networking events. I mean, look at Money 2020. We're all running around Vegas with thousands of us, but I have run into people in the bathroom that I have then done business with, like it's crazy. And so I do think that like the dinners for me, I'm also running 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I feel like the dinners for me are a great way to slow down in the very fast-paced city that is New York. But it really depends. If I'm competing for airtime during like a fintech week or a tech week or a conference, then yeah, it's going to be really, really tough. But I think if it's just another week in New York, like having an intentionally curated, focused dinner that's planned well in advance can be really effective.
And would you do, during that dinner, would you do like a fireside chat or like something to watch or consume or something? Or is it just like the dinner? Like I hear people have experimented with a few different things. So I wonder what you've found.
No, in my dinners, I feel like they're probably looking at screens all day. So I'm not trying to give them more screens to look at. I have done fireside chats. I have done panels. I do think that there's a time and a place for more educational. But I also prefer to do a lot of those like in 1 hour, more like Zoom. They're squeezing it in the middle of the day. I feel like it is really tough when people have mentally left the office or left their home office to be like, okay, and now I'm going to listen and watch something else that's like super structured and educational. I think people prefer the candid conversations. And so that's what I really try to instigate and start and provoke at these dinners.
Yeah. Very cool. So this has been fascinating. Cristina, thank you so much. I have one last question because you have so much experience in this space and you work with so many founders in the fintech space and revenue leaders. Is there a belief that you have when it comes to building GTM teams that maybe not everyone agrees with?
Oh man, this was a tough one to think about. I mean, a lot of my founders are very type A. They come from investment banking or they come from consulting. And so they're really metrics obsessed. And I think that's important. I myself used to work on Wall Street, so I know that numbers don't lie. But sometimes, like my hot take is sometimes I see founders focus so specifically on a goal number or a target metric that they're losing the forest between the trees a little bit. And what I mean by that is if our goal is 250 cold calls per rep each week, and you've got one rep who's making 250 cold calls and another rep who only hit 25, but the rep that did 250 cold calls only got one discovery meeting to move to demo, and the rep that only did 25 maybe went to 2 or 3 events or did some LinkedIn warm outbound and got 3 meetings that moved from the first call to demo. Let's not look at the 25 versus 250 and say that, oh, the 25 calls person is behind. And let's actually look at who produced the real meetings. And I think that's more so the metric we should be looking at. And it's not just about the activity metric, it's about the results. And so I think my hot take is that some people over-index on activity metrics when in reality, I think it's more about the outcomes.
Yes, couldn't agree more. I mean, happens in marketing so much.
Yeah.
Where everyone's tracking MQLs from an ebook download. And I'm just like, that does not mean that's a lead. Like, someone who just downloaded your ebook doesn't mean they want a demo. So totally, yeah, this is a recurring theme.
Yeah, and sales too, like it is a volume game. You do need to pick up the phone and see how many people you can reach out to because the chances will increase that one will answer and be the right fit. But in addition to a volumes game, it really is a results game. And so however you're getting results, to me, it doesn't matter. Just get the results.
Yeah. And also just think of your target audience. Like, for example, I mean, I'm selling to marketers and these are people who hate being sold to. So you have to think about like, depending on who you're targeting, are they more likely to pick up a call or prefer an event, for example, something like that. And I think, yeah, keeping that in mind is also super important.
And also now everyone's getting spam calls. So no one
wants... yeah, I never pick up my phone.
Right, right. So I'm like going back to my 100 warm, like that's my goal to any founder listening to this. I really encourage you to make your list of 100 accounts and figure out a warm way to get into all of them because to me, that is time better spent than making 250 cold calls that no one will pick up.
Amazing. Well, this has been super interesting. Thanks so much, Cristina. I really appreciate it. And do you have an event during your FinTech week that is open or is it invite only?
It's a little bit of both. So it's Wednesday, April 29th. We are looking to meet like Series A, Series B founders. That tends to be my client base as well as the sponsors. So we're trying to create a space for them to meet each other, network. We're going to do it on a rooftop. There'll be canapes and drinks on us. So yeah, if you're in New York for FinTech week, hope to see you.
Perfect. Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Cristina. Appreciate you coming on.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Thanks for listening. You can find show notes and information about guests at www.mintcopywritingstudios.com/podcast. And finally, huge thanks to Orama.tv for producing this podcast. Thanks for listening and see you at the next episode.